welcome to another episode of the Still Human podcast. So today's episode is based around how to feel less calm, really taking your time and also becoming more decisive. And I think that this can be really personally summed up as a general feeling of anxiety, rushing, while also simultaneously not being able to make your mind up. And the sort of crossover and the cross-contamination between the two of that paradoxical state of mind where you feel quite frantic, but you can't quite put your finger on the thing and be decisive in your decision-making ability. So based on my own personal experiences and some very useful knowledge and insights that I've gained and gathered from people, conversations, books, podcasts, and courses. Let's see what we can do in terms of just sharing a little bit of goodness. So I think to sort of kick off with, my own personal experiences with anxiety were enough that I needed to go and get some professional help with it. Really struggled with it, and it's been something that has been underlying within me for a very long time in terms of struggling making decisions and always trying to make the right decision, and also being very frantic, doing a lot of half-baked ideas and just generally like falling into like people pleasing, wanting to figure out every outcome. So I do come at this with a lot of empathy for people that are currently going through it, and also like just taking a step back and might not be as deep into the whole realm of feeling anxious and having that manic sort of mental energy around it. Might just be just generally struggling making decisions and not being in a situation where you feel like you can take your time and be deliberate and be a little bit more methodical. So I'm going to be hitting lots of different areas through this video and just generally doing my best to give out as much practical advice as possible, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to be able to make some changes. So I think that the main thing for me that I've realised over my time is that general feeling comes from wanting to feel like you can control the narrative. You want to be able to figure it out before it's happened in advance. You want to be able to take into account every situation and scenario in order to really make it feel like you are making the best choice, you're making the right decision, you've considered all the facts. That, as I said, is quite a big duality, because it then can lead to a place of being very indecisive. You know, you're struggling to make a decision because you're trying to consider these 16 things. And sometimes you're trying to take things into consideration that hasn't even happened yet, i.e. you're trying to process something that's happening in the future, and then you're trying to work back and make a decision on what could happen. For me, that was a very definition of what I struggled with. If things changed last minute, I really didn't like that. I wasn't very flexible. I was very rigid with what I wanted, and just generally had a tough time with external changes. And then I started digging into a lot and realised that actually external changes don't matter that much if you can control your internal environment. Not even control it. If you've got a sense of calm, of peace, of stability, inner confidence, and really just like acceptance that things are going to change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be subject to those changes. And when I am subject to those changes, if I don't like the changes, I can leave. I can ask questions. I can seek to understand why the changes have been made. And if I just have to accept them and I'm not particularly happy with them, then you can still accept the changes and not be happy with it, but not suffer too much as a consequence of those changes being made. So there's going to be a little bit of sort of like Eastern philosophy thrown in with this in terms of like just acceptance, but also like there's going to be a heavy dose of practical how to deal with, and also where it could come from. Because for me, it's very important for me to know with stuff like this, sort of like where it could be coming from, for me, like say for example, trying to figure out what to do in advance usually comes from some kind of past conditioning, maybe a single traumatic event, or like low level chronic over time traumatic events, which give you that feeling of, if I make the wrong decision, something bad's going to happen. If I make a bad decision, there's going to be really bad consequences. Or, you know, it might even be if I say something wrong, then there's going to be some serious consequences. So I need to make sure that, you know, I'm acting in a certain way to please people, so that there isn't then that consequence. You know, a lot of stuff happens to people when they're younger, and I think nowadays in 2024 we are really understanding the effects of childhood conditioning and, you know, behaviours presented to us as we're young, in all sorts of ways and environments, which can lead people to make them feel like they've got to be the right person, they've got to act a specific way, and then that can lead into just leading a lifestyle where you're afraid to make decisions because you're scared of making the wrong one. But then being paralyzed by that and being frustrated by that, and then if you're aware of that whole process going on, it can be a very difficult place to exist, because on one hand you're scared of making a decision, but on the other hand you really feel like you want to make a decision and take some agency in your life and move in a specific direction. So yeah, let's sort of get into it a little bit more. So I think for me, once I'd realised all of that and started understanding that I can affect my internal environment very well, you can affect your internal agency really good, your internal environment really well. It's important that once you realise that, or if you learn that you start and actually explore ways to make that internal change. So for me, some of the ways in which I do that are really sort of like, they're kind of free, it's the low-hanging fruit that you can get a lot of bang for your buck, are things like not going on social media as soon as you wake up. There's a whole load of reasons as to why, but not waking up and going from the one to the next, to the next, to the next, to quick change. I'm bored. That just doesn't do well for somebody who's got that kind of a predisposed mind to flick, to take into consideration a lot of stuff. We're trying to focus on calm. We're trying to focus on peace, on taking your time, being deliberate, having more of a methodical response rather than a manic reaction. Okay, I think that's a very good place to start with. So being very important, like being very cautious about how you spend your time at the start of the day, because I do believe that the start of the day really does set the tone for the rest of the day. So for me, making sure I've got a good wake up time, not laying in bed really too long. I might have like a couple of minutes to just like wake up properly, but definitely don't go on social media. I would recommend having something at the start of your day which you find peaceful. It could be reading, it could be just really enjoying your first cup of coffee and just sitting in calm. You might want to go and like stand in the garden, getting some sunlight. It's fantastic for a lot of other health reasons. Personally, I like to go for a walk in the morning as soon as I can. I do really like getting some kind of movement and sunlight in, so going for a walk at the start of the day hits a lot of birds with one stone. And as well, I feel like it gives me a chance to just breathe. You know, like we spend a lot of time indoors in artificial lighting. You know, we sit in traffic, we sit in cubicles at work, we sit in front of a screen a lot of the time for leisure. So just generally getting outside, it gives me a lot of good stuff. So that's something I like to do. Also, like reading, time spent reading is just fantastic, because again, it forces you to be slow and methodical in what you do. It's learning to train your brain to appreciate the slow and methodical, and appreciation of taking your time, putting a little bit of effort in, rather than just something's here, something's now, something's quick. So yeah, that's another thing to just consider. And another sort of like over top view of some of this is going to take work. All right, it's not just going to be one of those things where you can just click a button and everything's solved. This type of stuff does take work. So yeah, if you want something that's really, 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 really like non-work needed, just leave. Go find somebody else, because this is actually going to help, but it does take work. So I think also like something that I think is like tied in with all of this is like the energy that's built up. we can sometimes live up here a little bit and have a lot of like manic mental energy that gets built up over time. So doing things like and audibly allowing that energy to come out. There's been a lot of research done into like humming. A lot of monks, when they meditate, they do this closed mouth om, and that is literally allowing the vagal nerve to vibrate, which has a lot of very good benefits in terms of basically just neutralizing negative energy and stabilizing your emotions. So any type of meditation, humming, singing, allowing that energy to literally come out. Quick fun fact, your tears when you cry for negative reasons, they are actually negatively charged ions in there. So we have got inbuilt systems in our body to release that energy that's been built up. And that's another thing, an audible sigh. You're releasing that energy. You know, when you're angry and you scream and you shout, you're letting that energy out. So it's important to remember that there are things that we can do to stop that build-up of energy. All right, so it's working on both sides of the coin. It's figuring out ways to release it, and it's minimizing ways that it's built up. So there's the less that we then have to release. Sleep is also a really good one. Sleep is something that I only learned this the other day actually. One really important thing that we get in deep sleep when we have a restful night's sleep is we actually remove the emotional load from our experiences from the day before. So if you've had a really emotional day, you go to sleep, you process that emotion, and you wake up feeling a lot more rested, which is why like caffeine late at night isn't great. Being in like artificial lights really late at night isn't great because it affects that sleep. All right, so sleep is something that's really important to sort of manage in terms of like awake time and a sleep time, so that your body can rest fully, because that's just so important. And you know that practically as well, like when you've had a bad night's sleep, you just feel shit, you're more touchy, things frustrate you a little bit more easily. It's because you've not got rid of the emotional load from the day before. I think meditation is something, I know it's a little bit woo-woo and not everybody's into it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. One thing that I would say though is finding things that can help you feel like your mind is at peace. So calming music, spending time in nature, meditation. You don't even have to think about it as meditating. Sometimes I just lay down on my bed for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, set an alarm, and it's just like rest. You know, just letting your body relax to rest, to not have stimulus going in, calming yourself down, and you'll feel like you've almost had a nap, even if you've not. If you want to sit up straight, cross your legs, and do a little hand I can't remember what I can't remember the specific name for it, that allows the energy to sort of move around your body. If you want to lean into that, put some like specific frequency music kind of stuff on to allow that kind of stuff. You can lean into that as well. Either which way, just main thing is to just do something which helps you sort of calm down a little bit. Going into the reading stuff, I think that it's an interesting point of view to have in terms of like depriving yourself of activities. Not all the time, but you know, sometimes it's a practice, it takes effort, but depriving yourself of things which give you that feeling of I want it now, you know? So something really, really simple like not binge watching an entire series in one day. Do an episode and then think, right, okay, well, I've had an hour of watching TV, so rather than watching 4 hours of TV, I'll go for a walk, I will organize a few things for tomorrow, and I'm gonna go and have a nice hot shower and then get into bed half an hour earlier. So what you've done there is you've still left yourself something exciting to do for tomorrow, which is always good. You've worked on that deprivation of I want it now, I want it now. So that's over time going to help you calm. It's going to help you relax. It's going to help you feel like there is other times to experience this sort of stuff. You don't need to rush. You don't need to panic. You don't need to lean into that manic sort of brainwave. It's going to give you activities which calm, the hot shower, the relaxing, the walk. It's going to release some of that energy. You're going to work on your sleep, so you're going to get a better sleep. So you're going to wake up in a more relaxed state. And then also subconsciously or maybe consciously, you've organized a few bits for tomorrow so that then that's less stuff in your head for your head to carry. So even by doing something as small as that, rather than watching 3 or 4 hours of TV a day, watch one, spend a little bit of time organizing some stuff, go for a hot shower, go to the sauna, have a stretch, meditate, go for a walk, just do something which calms you, and then go to bed half an hour early, close the lights off, and have a nice gentle fall asleep. Even just doing that one thing, I can almost guarantee that you will feel the benefits after a few days, all right? So it doesn't have to be difficult. Yeah, I think another really important thing as we're on energy is exercise. Exercise for me is one thing that I categorically can rely on to release a lot of that built up head heavy energy. It doesn't have to be lifting weights, it doesn't have to be running, it can be yoga, it can be a brisk walk, it can be dancing, it can be rock climbing. I just think doing something which makes you hot, it makes you sweaty, it might feel a little bit sore the day after, just doing physical work, like our bodies, evolutionary, are designed to go and perform tasks. We can lead very sedentary lifestyles. There's one of the reasons why when I'm at my desk, I stand up because I'm burning off extra energy. I don't feel restricted. Again, your environment is a big one, but we'll leave that for another time. So like exercise is just fantastic, even if it's like, one walk every 3 days for 20 minutes. You're just doing something to get rid of that energy, okay? And just keep that in mind. It's not a thing of like doing something once that's really difficult, or doing something this only one way. It's about finding lots of different ways to help you feel like you've got a natural flow of energy. Because this energy that I'm talking about, this stress, it's frustration, it's anger, it's somebody at work's got a promotion over you and they're a bastard and you don't like them and everybody knows it, but your manager doesn't. And that sort of shit, it builds up, somebody cuts you off in traffic, or you were really looking forward to getting your favourite pizza on a Saturday night and you find out that the pizza place is closed, and there's just that like, oh, for fuck's sake. There's so much of that kind of stuff in life. You come out of work and it's raining and you've got a flat tyre, all of this kind of shit. It's always going to be there. So it's realising, again, a little bit of an Eastern way of thinking about it, it's finding a practice, it's finding processes which you can weave into your life so that you don't get too much of this and then you end up going a little bit, over to the other side that we don't want to go to. So exercise is fantastic. Now I think another thing to really sort of consider with this, and this is an area that I've spent a lot of time experimenting with, is your job. All right. Now, I've left jobs because of the stress that it causes after working there for 5 years. I've left jobs after 4 hours because of the horrible working culture that was there that I could see was just disgustingly toxic, and I didn't want to stay there for any longer. I've also stayed in jobs for years because of the fact that it was a beautiful working culture. The money wasn't great, but I wasn't stressed. It's about figuring out what you want out of a job, or do you want a career? And I think just defining that is very important, but also realizing that there are tweaks you can make to your current situation to make your work-life balance easier and less, and thus resulting in less stress. So can you change your working hours so that you get a little bit more time at the start of the day so you're not rushing around? Can you change jobs so that you do the exact same job for the same money, but you work a little bit closer to home, or you work at home to reduce, minimize, or stop the commute time? Can you just change what times you work so that you don't have to sit in your car for an hour each way? You can sit in your car for 20 minutes each way. And then think on top of that, right, well, what can I do in that hour each way or that 20 minutes each way, rather than sitting in traffic being annoyed by the fact that you sat in traffic? Can you put a podcast on? Can you put an audiobook on? Can you put some music on that just helps you relax and feels good? Can you, play a game of how many things can I think of today to be grateful for, to just literally start to rewire your brain to see the good in situations, rather than being sat in traffic thinking, oh my God, I've got to do this and I've got to sort that out and this is going to be really stressful, and fucking Brian's in the office today. No offense against any Brian's, I love Brian's, but Brian's in the office today and I don't like him. You're just creating more stress, So I've always been a very big advocate for thinking about how can I minimize my stress and get paid the same, Or how can I get paid more and keep the same level of stress and responsibility? Because if you can ultimately do a similar type of job and work closer to home, I mean, and it's a job, it's not a career, then why wouldn't you change jobs? Obviously, if it's a career, then we make sacrifices for the career. But yeah, just start to have this kind of concept running through your head. Like, I've got a really good friend, and we've got this sort of like, it's not even an official agreement, we just all like this together, where if we're both really, really tired and we're supposed to have like been hanging out together, we'll just say, dude, I'm knackered. I need some time by myself. And it's like, yeah, sound. And that's it. And linking into another topic is the people around you are very important. If you're surrounded by stressed out, manic people that are, they struggle with this and they struggle with that, it's fair enough. You love your friends, but you don't need to spend too much time around them, all right? And again, all of this stuff bleeds into that bucket of having all this energy, everything's going on, you're trying to think, you're trying to make the right decision, and ultimately, because you've got so much tension going on up here, it stops you from being able to just calmly make the right choice. That's where I'm getting at with this, is bringing it back to the main topic, is if you live a life that is full of all this kind of stuff, and you never make time for peace, you never make time for slowing down, if that pause there frustrated you because it was longer than a normal pause, you probably need to meditate. All right. So I think it's just remembering that the more of that type of stuff that you have in your life, the more difficult it is to calm yourself, to then move away from that feeling of being anxious, of being overwhelmed, of trying to figure things out because you've got so much stuff going on in your head. You don't have the space to see how you feel. All right. And that's what it's all based on. So like sort of jumping onto the other side in terms of actually then becoming decisive, I think that it's understanding the two are interlinked so well. You know, if you're stressed, you've got a lot going on, you're making, 1,000 decisions a day, you're going to be decision fatigued. Like, that is a real thing. There's only so many decisions that you can make in a day before your logical brain turns off and you go to your emotional brain. That's why we normally comfort eat at night rather than comfort eating in the day, because all the stuff you logically know about eating right goes out the window when you're tired and you just eat cake and pizza at night. And again, I've lived there for a very long time, so I'm speaking from experience, done the research, figured it out, and made some good changes. So I think, again, linking it back to why people can struggle being decisive, with all of the other stuff that we've discussed, I think in terms of specifically making decisions, it can come quite a lot from having made decisions in the past and then seeing that we could have made a better decision. It can come from when we're little, having people tell you you're wrong, or that's not the way you do this, or having your intuition questioned. Like if you start a new job, or you're a young kid and you want to do something a certain way, or you feel like there's a better way for it to be done, and then somebody in a more senior position, or an adult, or your caregiver just kind of squashes that down, says, no, you're wrong, that's not how you do it, this is how you do it. Having those experiences through your life will teach you that making decisions is painful, ultimately. And it's right. It's a protective mechanism to stop you from putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be hurt, where you're going to be ridiculed, where you're going to be made to feel weak, where you're going to be made to feel wrong. And that's where you can then, combine with the manic, trying to consider everything, that's where the two can make this really like painful place to exist in the middle. So yeah, I think just understanding that it's not something that you may or may not have done. It's not something that you've brought on yourself. It's just experiences through life can, push you down. It can weigh you down. It can, it's that whole thing of like, you only burn your hand once, but when in life, when you've been burnt 17 times, you're then very averse to trying to do it for the 18th. So it's just understanding that this process could be a little bit difficult, but if you've got this far into the video, you probably want to actually become a person who can be decisive, who can make choices, who can logically weigh up options and respond to things in a way that feels like you've got agency, you've got power, you've got control, you've got authority over yourself without just being subject to what other people want you to do and all that sort of stuff. So I think that, again, like one of the things that I realized is like I try and overthink, or I used to overthink and try and come up with the best possible solution to this problem, because one of the reasons was that I'm really good at reflecting. But the thing is, when you reflect too much and it becomes overthinking, you can slip into that world of always seeing that you could have made a better choice, and then that then becomes a thing of like, well, if I've always had the opportunities to make a better choice and I didn't, then maybe this choice could be made better. So I need to think about it. I need to figure it out more. Whereas understanding that you've always made the best choices that you could with the information and the situation that you were in and you had. And hindsight is beautiful, but hindsight's a bastard, because there's always a better choice that you could have made now that you've lived through the experience. So that's just one thing to consider. And also, like, on the same sort of token, is realizing that you don't have a crystal ball, so you don't actually know that making that choice would have been better, because it's that age-old thing of like, well, you know, if I'd have made the left turn rather than the right turn, I would have missed the traffic, I would have turned up to the meeting on time, and I would have made a better first impression. And it's like, well, if you made the left turn rather than the right turn, maybe you would have had a car crash. You know, you don't know what the fuck the options are. So I think just realizing that sometimes you can struggle with decisiveness and struggle with overthinking / anxiety, because you reflect so much on your past decisions and you feel like you could have made better decisions. You don't know. You just don't know. So I think that's just something to be aware of. And again, this is all coming from personal experience. And I think that, again, consciously realizing, like, a lot of people in this world, like, are very good at being able to put you in situations where you feel like you have to make a decision there and then, like salesmen, or just people who are a little bit toxic, manipulative, or they're just persuasive, or they're just very... They're people who need to know now. I need to know. Just tell me, what do you want? Like, they're a bit frantic again. They lean into that stress. They're very head heavy. They're not centered. They're not grounded. And sometimes just being around those kind of people can make you, again, if you're not decisive, if you feel like you struggle making a decision, if someone's pushing you, it's very easy to just like have a reaction and give out a knee-jerk reaction kind of thing, rather than just being like, I just need a minute. Just need to see how I feel about this. So again, understanding that external situations can try and dictate your internal environment, whereas the whole goal of this is to try and do some work internally so that the external environment doesn't affect you to the level where you then look back and think, fucking hell, I actually didn't want to make that choice. I didn't want to buy that thing, or I didn't want to say yes to that party or that social event. I didn't want to, but I felt pressured, you know? Pressure is only being able to applied by something which feels like it's got more pressure than you. So if something's pressing in on you and you feel weak on the inside, you'll feel that as pressure. Whereas something's trying to press on you, but you feel full, you feel decisive, you feel strong, you feel powerful, but at the same time you feel calm, you feel rooted and you feel grounded, then there's no pressure. You can just observe what they're trying to do. And it might not even be something that they're trying to do for a bad reason, you know, it's just some people are like that. And you can just be like, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then they're like, all right, cool. And then it's like, oh, like, I'm allowed to do that. I remember the first couple of times that I started, and again, at the start, it is a conscious decision. It's, again, learning to rewire how you respond in situations. It's learning to almost speak a new language and walk in a new pair of shoes. It's very uncomfortable at first, especially if, you know, you've been like people pleasing, you're trying to do the right thing, you've struggled making a choice based on your wants and needs, so you try and do it for what other people seem like they would want you to do and all of that kind of stuff. Actually, like, taking the time for yourself and figuring out what you want and where you stand and what your perspective is, it's a big thing to do. It's got a lot of stuff to do with like character and identity and stuff like that. And if you do struggle with stuff like that on that kind of level, then I would really recommend speaking to like a therapist and a counsellor to get some real help. This is just advice from my own personal experiences and knowledge that I've picked up and learned. But like the first couple of times that you do it, it's very stressful. Like, it's very scary. You feel like that the world's going to crumble around because you've told somebody what flavour of fucking bread you want, or it's like, do you want to come to my party that I've got on Saturday? And you're like, man, Saturday's my only day off. I really want to chill. You're allowed to say, I've got plans. You know, what are your plans? I'm having a day with myself. And if they have a problem with that, you probably don't want to be at their party, you know? And I think just understanding that as like a general concept of it's okay to live life like this. And, you know, on a bigger level, you might lose some people. Some people might not respect that you've all of a sudden become loving to yourself and you've set boundaries. But again, if they're the kind of people, you don't want those people in your life. And I've actually realized that the more you say no, the more people respect a yes. Because with people in my life, I've set a lot of healthy boundaries to make me happy, to make me feel safe, to give me space and allow me to live a life that I feel is aligned with what I want and how I want to live. It means that I see a lot of people a lot less, but they respect that and they love me still the same, even though at the start it was a bit of a weird adjustment period. There's been times when like friends and family and stuff have sort of like said, is everything okay? Are you all right? You know, I've not heard or seen from you in a while. And I'm like, yeah, everything's great. Like, I'm just a pretty quiet person who recharges my batteries when I'm by myself. I've got a full-time job. I'm trying to start a business. I've got a partner. I, look after my body. I go to the sauna. I see my friends. And amongst all of that, I'm also doing all of this work on myself and like, you know, reading and podcasts and research and making notes, and I'm a busy person. So when you see me, I'm present. I don't have my phone, you know, there's nothing going on in my head. It's just me and you, and that's it. And when you get to that point, people appreciate the fact that you're like that because they then get you fully, 100%, and they appreciate that they get you. So they see that in order for you to show up like that, you have to live like this. And again, just understanding that that's a fucking thing was mind-blowing to me. I never had anybody to show me that that was a thing at all until I actually started realizing that that's a thing that you can start to do. I think I was like in my early to mid 20s. And then it takes a while to start to embody it. And even now I can get caught up in it, you know? So that's why it's a practice. It's about finding these small things that you can do every day, like going for a walk, like meditating for 5 minutes in the car before you go into a potential environment where there are people that can pull you back into that anxious, you know, undecisive kind of way of being. It's about having these reminders with yourself. It's about journaling when you've done something that you appreciate and patting yourself on the fucking chest and being like, I did a good job on that, because then that reinforces that brain, those processes and the wiring that's in the brain that will counteract some of the previous conditioning that made you struggle with being decisive. You know, it's all about rewiring the brain and developing an identity as a person that I am strong. I am in control of myself. I do have enough love for myself to be able to say no to things that don't serve me, and being okay with potentially losing people. But actually, you don't really lose that many people, you know. People just respect you, and people have got their own shit going on in their own lives as well. Like, that was something that was really important to me, is like, nobody actually cares if one person doesn't show up to their party, or if you don't see them for an extra week, or, you know, stuff like that. It's like people aren't really that concerned. You're not the center of everybody's universe. So that was like a little interesting thing that I went through. So yeah, I think that, you know, just being deliberate about this kind of stuff and doing the work, you know, getting the help, reading the books, listening to podcasts, experimenting, journaling, and just generally understanding that this is a concept that can be done. People have started in much worse places than I am and ended up in much better places than I am. It's just about doing the work. It's about being patient. It's about knowing what you want as an outcome and then being flexible on your approach, and then have fun with it, you know? Like, there's been some times where like I've been around like pushy salesmen or like really cheeky people that just, you can tell that they're like, oh, you're a little rascal, you know, you don't have bad intent, You've not got a bad nature. You just push things. You like to, expand and try and just see what you can get out of people. And then when you start and play that game back to them in a cheeky, fun, playful kind of way, rather than them getting what they want out of you, they kind of give you a look of like, you kind of get it, it's a game, it's nothing serious. But in order to get to that point from a place of like, having like crippling anxiety and shit, it took a while. So don't rush. It's okay. Again, it's about being precise with what you want to do. See what I did there? It's okay to take a moment and allow what you want to come out in you. And just as a final touch, that's one thing that I've really noticed has improved is my communication. When I was younger, I used to try to say the right thing. I tried to be funny. I tried to seem like I knew what people were talking about. I wanted to have an input, even if I didn't have anything there. Something would just blurt out, and then, you get laughed at. You get jokes made about you. You're the weird, unpopular kid, blah, blah, blah. And also, you just interrupt people a lot, which isn't nice. Not when it's like, and that's the thing that I was talking about earlier about that head heavy stuff. It's almost like there's a thing inside of you that's trying to get out, and you're not in control of it. Whereas when you start and do this type of stuff, you take that control back and you respond rather than react, It's like if you see something flying at your face, you're like, whoa, and you try and get out of the way. You don't think about it. It's a reaction. Whereas if you can see something slowly coming towards you, you're like, oh, well, do you know what? I could move out of the way, or I could just do that. Calm. It's a response rather than a reaction. So now I communicate in a responsive way. I can be patient enough to let people have the space that they want in order to get their concepts, their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings out. And I hold that space for them so they feel like I'm being present. And that's what I was saying about people appreciate the way that I am now, so they understand why I live the way I live. Like, and turning the roles reversed, I would much rather see somebody who's very, very present. They're working on themselves. They've got a lot of, and I don't mean to sound like egotistical about this, I'm just saying like hypothetically, they're working on themselves. They've got stuff going on. You can see that they're growing in ways. And when I speak with them, they hold space for me. They're present and they actually give a shit about what I'm saying, plus they actually have the internal space and capacity to then have an actual conversation with me. I'd rather see that person once a year for an hour than see somebody every day that is just like fucking manic all the time. You can't have a conversation with them because they're interrupting you, they're flaky, they never make any decisions on anything. You just don't want to be around those kinds of people, but fuck me, you don't want to be that kind of person either, So that's my 2 cents on becoming a little bit more decisive, struggling with making decisions / trying to make the right decision, and just generally feeling like you've got the ability to move in the direction that you want to move towards. Because ultimately, there's kind of nothing better than that, You feel like you're in control of the human that your consciousness occupies. So yeah, hope that helps. If you have got any questions, any comments, anything that you would like to add, feel free to drop a comment. And yeah, I'll see you real soon.